Welcome back to another episode of Digital Gold Dust, and very excited today to have another celebrity guest, I would say. Celebrity guest.
Well,
we made it, Mum.
As we welcome the wonderful Maddy Shine with us today. So don't say we don't treat you, to our lovely listeners. So yeah, a real treat today. And obviously we couldn't have a season all based around visibility without chatting to Maddy. So a little introduction for anyone that doesn't know Maddy already. Then Maddy is a visibility coach for women in business. She's helped thousands of female entrepreneurs with training, courses, and her Visible Vibes online community. She firmly believes that life is literally full of opportunity, and it's up to us to find and get booked by those who want to work with us. Specialising in the creative industries, she has been featured on many industry stages, podcasts, events in the UK and around the world. And a few million gifts. I'm just going to add that in as well.
yes, I you may know me from gifts. Yes. Like when people look at me sideways in the pub, and I'm like, "Don't worry, it's not porn." No.
Which is why we say that you're our celebrity guest. Not porn, obviously. The gift. Maddy, we love this bit of copy from your website. So we're just going to share it with our listeners because we think it's really on point. As a business coach, I help women who run their own businesses get visible. That's right. I help women just like you show up authentically for your clients, for yourselves, and yes, for Google. I think of visibility like a buffet. You don't have to eat everything at the table, but you do have to eat to see results in your business. You're a fabulous, talented business owner. You know this because you have a good idea. You've created things that people enjoy, and you've had happy clients and customers. You just don't have enough of them. And I think that's, really in tune with a lot of what we've been saying through this whole series about visibility is you can do visibility your own way. And I think that's probably going to be a big theme of this episode for us all to chat through. Now, for our listeners, yes, Maddy is kind of a celebrity, but we've actually kind of both known Maddy in some way, shape or form for years. So Maddy and I, although we were just talking about when this was, because it feels like kind of a past life thing.
Honestly.
Maddy and I met at a supper club 6 or 7 years ago. Probably now, actually thinking about it, and that is another shout out to Vicky Shilling there, because that was a Vicky Shilling supper club. It feels like we mention Vicky in every episode because she's a big part of how our circle ended up forming.
Well, yeah, too right. She's brilliant.
Yeah. I've been on your mailing list, I think probably forever, Maddy, and I know Sammy's taken your blogging, what used to be your Blogging for Gold course. So to us, Maddy, you're pretty much the peak of visibility. And funnily enough, weirdly, you showed up at the weekend rather unexpectedly. Guys, can we talk about the fact that there's a picture of the two of you
with my dad?
Yeah. Honestly, it was nuts. I was at this random pub that I've never been to before. My partner loves this pub. It's out in Carshalton in Surrey. I've never been there before. And I was just standing in the queue, and I was like looking at the back of this woman's head, and I was like, that looks like a lot like Sammy. But I've never met Sammy in real life. And then I was like, oh, I'm a bit drunk. I don't know whether I should say hello or anything. and then so I thought, screw it. And I just sort of like walked up to the bar, and I just like leaned around like a really cartoon way, and like staring at her. Just thought, because if it's not her, it'd be really funny anyway. And then you turned around and you were like, oh my God! And it was like, it was amazing. And Sammy's family are the sweetest family, honestly. They all were just like, can I have a hug? Can I have, like, the kindest family, honestly. I've never felt more like a celebrity than when I met your fam on Saturday. Sammy, it was amazing.
That's so funny, because it's one of those like really like double take moments, like you say, because we've never met in real life but known each other, kind of again in circles for a few years. So it's kind of like, oh, you're real.
I know you.
Yeah, it was amazing. We were just like joking. We were like, we've never seen each other's legs. We don't know how tall we are. Like, it's funny because we're so used to head and shoulders from Zoom, right? And it
Yeah.
was just like, it was like, oh, hi, person in real life. We're actually in 3D, and like, oh, it was so much fun. Yeah,
It's like
it was
I thought I
amazing.
saw some blue hair earlier, but just didn't kind of like tie it in. I was like, oh, there we go. Of course, it's Maddy, and it is literally my local. And
Yeah,
so, big shout out to the Hope in
yeah,
Coshon, a community pub, which is obviously probably no surprise with finding us there, because they're great, and yeah, beer festivals there are always good fun. So that was
yeah. Very, very happy day.
so random.
I
But yeah,
suppose the power of visibility, that the two of you had never met in real life, but you instantly recognized each other when you did meet in real life.
yeah.
For sure, for sure. I think that I really like it when things like that happen anyway, like it doesn't happen that often. But I do particularly, I don't know, there's something about happening in this part of the world as well, like in a smaller town, you're like, oh, sure, I know that person up the street or whatever. But yeah, it's I think definitely the power of Instagram, making connections like that.
Absolutely.
Lovely.
Yeah, and very serendipitous, being just before we did the podcast. It was like,
Yes.
next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, Maddy, you used to be known as the Visibility Queen, and I know you're not
Yeah.
using that term anymore. So I think that's probably like a little bit of a teaser for the sort of pivot, the great pivot that you've done quite recently. So do you want to tell us a little bit about how,
About
well,
that. Yeah.
kind of like, I guess, what led to that point, and what the great pivot is, as
Yeah.
yeah, been a big part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have actually pivoted quite a few times in my business. I've been running my business now 11 years this month. So I started out kind of basically like a VA, like a virtual assistant. But because I'd had a marketing background, I quickly started helping people with website management, with blogging, with social media, all that kind of stuff. And so it very quickly sort of snowballed into I was trying to run a full stack marketing agency on my own, which didn't work out quite so well. I got quite burnt out, funny enough. But I got quite quickly known as an SEO expert, because I had this marketing background, and I've been doing all this kind of side hustling essentially, and sort of picking up all this knowledge and experience along the way. And so then sort of someone anointed me this title, SEO Queen. And I was like, oh, okay, fine, let's go with it. And then I sort of started doing more and more SEO, getting found on Google, all that jazz. And because I'm quite good at turning boring, dull information into something that people are actually motivated to do something about, then obviously SEO lends itself quite well to that, because SEO is dry as dust most of the time. And so, and I was just like, no, but if you do it like this, and they're like, oh, people, including yourself, Sammy, like, oh, in that case, yes, that feels like something doable and manageable and achievable. And then people got really great results from it. So I started launching all these kind of courses. That was about the time I met you, Lee, at that dinner, at supper club. And I, was doing all these launches, and in lockdown, online courses had a massive boom. So I just basically really went into that, launched a membership community called Visibility at the time, and now called Visible Vibes, because we rebranded that last year. I say me, I rebranded it. And then
My team.
the royal we, my multiple personalities. And then I was kind of like, just before the pandemic, to be honest, I sort of said to a business coach, I was like, I really see the end of SEO expertise in my mind coming, because I don't want to talk about keywords for the rest of my life. I just don't want to do that. And because I'd already done these other evolutions, I thought, I can do this next one. And I'm really glad I didn't at that time, because trying to do a pivot in lockdown, as we know from witnessing so many pivots, sometimes it did work very well, sometimes it didn't. And I thought, no, I'll just leave into the SEO for now, and I'll do that. And it did work very well, and lots of people got fantastic results, which I'm delighted with. I taught over 150 women about blogging to get to page 1 of Google. but also about telling their stories and about putting words to a virtual screen rather than waiting for people to pay them to tell those stories. And I really started to see, hang on a second, I'm really helping women find their voices. I'm helping them go for other opportunities. You know, women were kind of showing up on video in a way that they weren't before they were doing my courses. They were going on podcasts. They were launching their own podcasts. They were doing all sorts of wonderful things as a result of the confidence they were finding from doing my courses. So this is where I sort of started just about, I'm going to say 18 months ago now, kind of going, right, the great pivot, it's coming. And then so earlier this year, 2023, I basically made the announcement. And it's not really like a massive pivot. To many people are like, you still teach SEO. Fine, I do. However, it's not the focus because it never really was the focus. So I taught, you know, I love to talk about why we aren't visible as women. I love to talk about how we've been told to sit down, shut up, not have an opinion, not dare share our thoughts. You know, I love talking about confidence and how that doesn't look a certain, because I do think people kind of go to me, well, it's all right for you, you're loud and you're confident. And I certainly wasn't always this way. I wasn't born with blue hair, you know, like it was just all these kinds of elements. I was like, well, what kind of brought me to this? And what is it that I admire with people who are showing up on Instagram? Because they're not showing up like me, they're showing up like them. And that's what I love. And how can I show women that all these things are possible? So that's really what we're focusing on. So I still have SEO elements. So I'm still going to be teaching blogging for gold, probably one more time in September. But I'm also moving more and more towards helping people launch that course that they really want to do. So I've got a program to do that called Teach What You Know. I've got Momentum, which is marketing with personality course. You know, things like this is much more exciting and to me to teach. And of course, that's kind of the point. Like I love serving all these women, but also if you're not happy with how your business model's going, then, you know, you've got to ultimately change it up to keep you stimulated and keep you excited about it, right? So I do think that we don't allow ourselves enough space. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to be that example I want to see. And so I very happily announced that earlier this year. It's exciting.
Really?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It does sound a little bit like the business was initially kind of driven more by market forces and kind of ran away with itself effectively whilst you were kind of figuring out, right, what this works, and then you kind of had that sort of, wait, but what do I want from this kind of moment? Is that
for sure? I was listening to different business coaches' advice rather than relying on actually how do I want to show up. And there is a time and a place for a lot of that advice. I've implemented, I've seen success. Some of it wasn't for me, absolutely fine. So no disrespect to any of that advice that I got, but you know, I still do quite a few things that I don't advertise for, but I get money for. And I used to have a deep shame about that. And I was like, God, if everyone finds out, they'll think that I'm somehow not authentic and things like that. And actually, I just, you know, I'm like, no, I just talk about what I'm passionate about. And I do make money from that. And then I do other things to, you know, because I want a certain kind of lifestyle, basically. So I do think there's a certain amount of deciding for myself and finding that confidence in my own and trusting my own judgment, essentially. I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, definitely. And being your own inner compass rather than being entirely guided by, well, this guru says I should do it this way, and that person says that you have to follow this 5-step process if you're going to win as a business owner. And of course, that doesn't work for a lot of us if it's not aligned with our values and what we want from life. Completely.
That there is no blueprint. And that might be a controversial thing to say, but yeah, there's no blueprint. So it's just like there's guidance, there's support, there's ideas, there's concepts, there's tools and techniques.
Yeah.
But there can't possibly be a blueprint for us all. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, well, it's not a controversial thing here because we're constantly saying it.
Yeah, so, well, that's what I thought. I just thought, like you two kind of know, you forge your own path. The fact, Lee, that you don't do Instagram, gosh, this is, for some reason, this feels very controversial, but I love it. I'm here for it.
I know. People were like, but what will you do? Have some more free time to create content and work on my client stuff and, walk the dogs. But yeah, no, I don't do Instagram. I don't do Facebook. It is purely LinkedIn and the website for me, and obviously now the podcast as well. I just didn't find them very helpful spaces, and most of my ideal clients are on LinkedIn. So for me,
there you go.
That was kind of just how I could show up best without feeling like I was spread super thin and doing what people said I should do, because I don't really respond very well to "you should be doing this" or "I'm going to tell you a prescriptive way to do things."
Yes, no, absolutely. I think that the word "should" can get in the bin most of the time, because all it ever does is create a spiral of shame. I feel, from when we don't do things. Like, I feel like the wrong people listen when you say you should be doing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't mean the wrong people. I mean the people who are already berating themselves, rather than the people who need to hear the advice. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
It certainly gives me a lot of food for thought sometimes, because I'm just like, oh, I probably should be connecting in certain ways on Instagram. I did a post last night about this. I was like, you can follow and unfollow whoever you like. Like, it really doesn't. There are, of course, strategies to grow your Instagram more, but there was something, actually, Charlotte and I were having a chat last year. If someone gave me 100,000 followers tomorrow on Instagram, would I be able to cope with that? No, I wouldn't actually. So I much prefer this kind of, feeling my way kind of process, rather than the prescriptive methods, for sure.
Definitely. I think it's that people can get caught up, can't they, in the kind of like more is better. So like the more followers, the more this, the more that. But then if they're not engaged, or you're not actually having the conversations, which is the whole point, then just having numbers makes no odds.
Absolutely. I get far less engagement than I ever did, but I get much more meaningful engagement and money, and more people are coming to buy my stuff. So it's fine.
Yeah. The idea of maintaining a presence sends shivers up my spine. People saying, "Oh, well, I've got to post because I've got to maintain a presence." I'm like, but you're not, because you're not present. You're just chucking stuff out there with no purpose or intention.
Yes,
and that's a real problem. I think it's noisy enough without you doing that.
For sure. 100% agree. Yeah.
So I feel like we need to just come back a moment. We've possibly missed kind of an integral thing of, can we talk about what visibility actually means for you, Maddy, for a minute?
Yeah. It means being seen by more of the people who you need to be seen by, in whatever way that looks. So that's why I like to think of visibility like a buffet now, because you could eat everything at the table, you could polish all those plates clean, but you're not going to be feeling very well, and it's not very sustainable. So actually, by sampling different things, from those gorgeous big salad bowls of Instagram reels, or maybe leaving TikTok right now because you feel like you might be intolerant, or like, how far can I go with this analogy? Like, you just really kind of load up your plate and enjoy that. And I love a buffet, so that's probably why I came to it. Just like just diving in. But I do think that there's a lot to be said for there's so many different opportunities to be visible now. And I used to say SEO stood for Seeking Exciting Opportunities. I used to have a free Facebook group for it many years ago. And because I've always thought that that's what the internet's about. Like, it's all about, okay, that opportunity didn't quite work out. There's millions of other ones. You do not have to go for them all to see success. And you don't even have to treat them all with the same sense of urgency. You don't have to, be doing all of them and maintaining all of them in order to see success. And it can be and is very, very flexible. And I do think that a lot of people kind of feel very rigid and very trapped in this visibility game. And I don't think that is healthy. And I think that is, like you just said, adding to the noise for the sake of it. And I think that we need to take a breath. What's actually working? If something isn't working, fine, go and top up your skills, come and join my membership community, whatever you need to do to actually learn the step-by-step stuff. And then look at, I don't think it's lack of ideas that's holding you back. What's actually going on there? What do you actually need to break down more? Because often there's a lot more going on to the idea of being visible than I think we give ourselves credit for, So yeah, so that's pretty much what visibility means to me.
It's interesting that you use the word game in there, because I do think people get hung up on the numbers and the stats is obviously like a scoreboard. So there's that element of it. There's also the idea of trying to game the system. Somehow I'm going to beat the system. I'm going to beat the algorithm with this one piece of copy or content or whatever. And I'm going to go viral, and that's going to beat it all. When obviously, of course, the rules are constantly changing.
The rules are constantly changing. We're not told what the rules are. They're free apps. There are always different ways to use them. There are different ways to use them within the different ways to use them. And I think that sometimes it could be quite easy to throw the baby out with the bathwater and go, Instagram doesn't work for me. And I'm like, you're a really visual business, so and you are trying to target women within a certain age range, so they're going to be on Instagram. So you better try a different thing on Instagram. I don't know what to tell you. And I do think that when we think of the game, then we do beating the system. The number of times people have said to me in the past, "Oh, Google hates me, Instagram hates me." No, they don't. No, they don't hate you. They have no brain. It's literally a computer. And no matter what we might think about AI, it hasn't actually taken over the human race yet. And I do think that it's not very healthy for us to think about beating the system, because there isn't just one system that we're trying to beat. There's it's like multifaceted. There are so many factors involved. We haven't actually determined where we're going. So if we haven't determined what direction we're heading in, it's sort of like climbing into an Uber and expecting them to know telepathically where we want to get to. So we can't like go, I'm not going to give you a map. And then they're like, yeah, but we don't know where you want to go. And you're like, no, but I'm not going to give you a map because I'm beating the system. Like it doesn't work. I like to use analogies a lot. And I think that when you have this kind of mindset of I'm beating the system, or I'm going to try and beat the system, I'm going to try and not play the game, then you're going to just end up feeling really resentful of your business, and then resentful of any clients who do come your way, because you're like, oh, well, I don't even know how you found me, and then basically just give up on the marketing game altogether, and then you'd have a business. So it's like this kind of like you're driving yourself into the ground, basically. So there are elements, yes, like I said, from the buffet table that you take up, but absolutely, like you can't beat the system on every single platform. Like it's just not going to happen,
No,
if you want to be visible.
The amount of like what's invested in the teams that are there to create these algorithms and work through and get, hold people's attention. It's a whole massive thing. So for you as one person to be like, I'm gonna take you down, like it's just too much to, you just got to kind of accept that is what it is, and that's what it is designed for, and really try and do it in a way that is enjoyable for you. Because if you're not enjoying it, as you say, like where your clients are, whether you enjoy it or not, that's going to make a bigger difference, because that comes across, doesn't it? Like that, if you're kind of, I hear so many business owners being like, oh, I hate social media, but I've got to do it. And like, that's going to come through, isn't it? In your interactions, in your posts. And if you've got that kind of quite negative attitude, or you're really, struggling with it, it's it's not going to be a great way to kind of spark those lovely connections if you're kind of like, oh, I have to do it.
Nope, exactly. And when I think about opportunities, that's what I'm really thinking about. It's the connections. You know, I have so many wonderful people in my life thanks to the connections of being visible. I have a business, a thriving business, thanks to being visible. I continue to think of different ideas thanks to being visible, but invisible in different ways at different times. There's not a prescriptive way that I'm doing it. And also by being open to what those connections say to me, share with me. You know, I really community is really, really important to me, but it needs to be important to the visibility game, because we're a pack of animals. You know, we're not individuals. We need these connections in our lives. And because of the internet, that obviously happens more and more online. And I think that we don't give ourselves enough grace and space to do that. I think that we need to, you know, I love the course that you're doing with Vicky Lee, where Copy That Connects. I just love the title of it alone. I was just like, that's exactly obviously what copy needs to do, because that's obviously a really important part of the visibility game. When you're reading words, you need to feel good and connected to those words, right? It's a bit like I've just rebooted my own podcast, because I really enjoyed actually connecting with people in that way. And again, it comes back to, I'm not just maintaining a presence. Sure, if I was kind of like trying to shoot for this kind of really high flying lifestyle, I'm not. I'm just trying to have a lovely life that I really enjoy and that, you know, is sustained by my business, you know? So I think that, I can't remember what the original question was. I've gone on a few different tangents there, but yes, visibility.
I think probably ties in really with what you've kind of been saying, but what would you say like are your kind of top tips for someone that wants to get more visible in their business? And obviously we know that there's sometimes quite a lot of barriers for people to do that, but yeah your kind of top tips.
Need support. You need support in place. You need to, some people I speak to don't have supportive partners or supportive families for their businesses. And whilst that breaks my heart, there are many online communities where you can find that support. My Visible Vibe membership community, casual plug, is one such place, where basically all female entrepreneurs, but also the free ways, being on Instagram, finding your people, finding those connections. The number of times I've reached out to people, haven't always worked out. I'm connected with people all over the world thanks to this little old app, and that's where I choose to spend my time and make those connections. So support, you need to find the right support. You also need to feel inspired. If you don't feel inspired, and however that looks to you, whether that's, you know, buying your favorite magazines and feeling inspired by that, whether that's reading fiction, whether that's getting out in nature, whether that's having conversations with people and a coffee and a catch up. You know, like Sammy said to me on Friday, I've often thought of messaging you, let's go out for a pint. I was like, please do. I love to be invited out for a pint. I don't do coffee dates, but I do pint dates. You know, like it's just, I can't bear coffee shop dates. I'm just like, right, we've drunk our coffee, what's next? You know, find another coffee. I don't even drink that much coffee, it probably doesn't help. So I'm like, I might have a slice of cake, I don't know. And I think that so support and inspiration. So who inspires you? Lean into more of that. So I love reading like older famous women memoirs. I love reading their autobiographies and memoirs, and it inspires me. Or I love reading, you know, in fact, memoirs in general are really fun to read for me. I just love reading about, I'm just really nosy at other people's lives. And I just think that, you know, finding people who maybe I would never have met in real life. I've come across them on Instagram. I follow them for a bit because I love their colourful home, or I love the ridiculous videos they put out with their cat, or, you know, whatever it is. And I think that is something that's really, really important to me, because if I don't feel inspired, then I don't feel inspired to put out any of my own content, whether that's related to whatever I'm inspired by or not. So support and inspiration. And also education. I do think that there's obviously, I'm going to say it because I offer a lot of different trainings, but if you're not open to learning new ideas and new concepts, new tools and techniques, you're going to drive yourself into the ground. Some people say to me, but Maddy, I don't want to grow my business. I just kind of want to like maintain it. That's absolutely fine. I'm not going to say, everyone's got to have a multi-million-pound business in order to feel validated. That's just not how I roll. And I do think that there is a lot to be said for this kind of, oh, well, there's a big difference between the struggling artists and the high-flying multi-million coaches. And what do you do if you want to live in that in between? So, obviously this is why it's brilliant that your podcast is, because this is the sort of people you speak to, right? And so I think that when you are looking at that, you need to feel that you are gaining something isn't the right word, but when you are feeling supported and inspired, you are more open to learning, and therefore those kind of three things really help. You kind of, they buoy you along, I suppose. Sort of help you feel motivated to move forward, because no one can feel motivated on their own. You need all those kind of three things around you, I feel.
Yeah, that's a big one. It is really hard, especially when you're the only person in your business. You spend enough time on your own and in your own head. So it's nice to have those other people to connect with, even if it's just like, oh God, it's a tough day, or this is hard, or and then people go, yeah, know exactly what you mean, it's fine, or just had loads of brilliant conversations. I'm part of the Small Business Hive, and they've been brilliant, because I always come away from any of those meetups, because I've realized that although I'm kind of fairly introverted, I do need people around me. I do need physical human interaction. So I was like, okay, this is becoming a problem in my business, that inspiration bit was starting to wane, because it's like, okay, it's me in this room like a lot of the time, and I need to get out and about. And so I started joining some in-person meetups, and it's just amazing how those conversations spark, and it's just like, well, why don't you try this, or I know this person, or they're really great, follow them, or you might find this really interesting. And it's amazing how you come away like buzzing with ideas that you're not going to get if you're just sort of stuck in a room with your laptop, or not in communicating and being in part of wider communities. And it's nice when you can find, especially other kintroverts, as we like to call them, other like-minded people as well, that are kind of like, yeah, you're doing business your way, I'm doing it my way. And it's nice to see other people really doing it their own way, and realizing that there is, as we say, like, there is no blueprint. So the more visibility we can give to those people,
we are all very different, but we can all do things different ways and still see the success that we want to see in our own businesses. I don't know whether you saw yesterday on my story, Sammy, I was talking about why is it professionalism means that you're not allowed to have a personality? And because I do think there's a lot to be said for that. And I think, I was getting the messages just like, actually, by having our own businesses, we get to explore that side a lot more, that uniqueness that we all have, that personality that we want to share, and therefore be able to find those connections more easily because we're doing that.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is that we're not corporate entities, we're not behind this facade. It is, and that's tricky, because that's, as one of our other podcast guests said, visibility is vulnerability. And I mean, well, it'd be interesting to see, from you, with all the women you work with, I imagine that vulnerability piece is probably comes up a lot, because it's like getting through that. Okay, if I'm really showing and connecting, because that is how you connect, with showing who you really are, that's pretty vulnerable to, once you put yourself out there, then you're open to scrutiny, open to judgment. So I can imagine that being barriers for people.
It is, but I will say this, you're actually being vulnerable to yourself rather than vulnerable to the scrutiny of others. I think that we're the worst judge of ourselves, and that we give ourselves an extremely hard time. But that's because of everything that's been ingrained in us to do so. We have not been told it's okay or safe that's why it feels weird to be vulnerable and to be open and to share what we're passionate about, which is probably why I'm so enthusiastic about all of this, and particularly, you know, showing up as yourself, because I do think that we need to speak up for our weird niche little interests. We need to, you know, be unapologetically weird, because let's face it, we are all pretty odd ducks. Like that's why we run our own businesses, like we just are. And I think that when it comes to vulnerability, then we need to find ways to kind of mitigate that risk, I suppose, because what's happening is that all our kind of inner protector self, all our different sort of factors are trying to come into play, and they're going, this isn't safe, and here's all the reasons why. And actually, that's what happens whenever you try something new, whenever you try something in a new way. So that actually, if you just sort of start to dip your toe in the water, maybe show your face on stories a bit more, but don't quite speak yet. Or if you go, oh my God, I really, you know, I'm never going to dance on reels. Like I would never do that. Fine, don't do that. Find other ways to do it. You know, there's kind of ways to step in and just to kind of to show yourself, oh yeah, this isn't actually as terrifying as I thought. I'm not judging myself as much as I thought, or maybe I am, but other people aren't. And that's kind of like the way that I am helping myself feel safe in that way. Yeah, I mean, I'm rambling, but I do think there's a lot to be said for showing that we can do these things, but we don't have to, like, it's not about like feeling the fear and doing it anyway. It's about showing ourselves that we can be safe taking these steps, and showing up anyway.
Yeah, it's a bit like a muscle, isn't it, that you kind of build up. I mean, I think we were a bit like that with the podcast. We were kind of like, neither of us really had any desire to have a podcast, but because we kept having these conversations, the two of us, it was like, just kept saying like, this is an idea that just won't go away. It's like, it keeps knocking. Like, I think we need to have these conversations more publicly and with other people, because these are important things to say. And, you know, the first podcast recording, I was ill for a whole week. I was literally, my whole nervous system just went, because it was like, oh, I'm going to be out there, people, you know, going to people are actually going to listen, maybe. Heaven forbid. And of course now it's like, it's fine, and it gets less scary, as you say. You've proven, okay, I've done it, I didn't die, nothing, the world didn't end. You know, you adjust and go on to do other things.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I remember when Instagram stories first became a thing and people were like, Maddy, with your personality, you definitely need to be doing Instagram stories. I remember 3 different business coaches said that to me, and I cried every time someone said that to me. I said, absolutely not. Don't be ridiculous. I hate the way I look. No one wants to see this face. No one wants to hear this voice. Like, I really wasn't kind to myself about it at all. Now you can't bloody get me off them. Like, it's ridiculous. I'm on there every day, no matter how I look. But I really was like, oh, you know, I sound too much like Emma Thompson, Julie Andrews had a baby, and everyone will be like, oh, you know, she's like, yeah, as if that's a problem. Like, come on, they're quite famous actually, Maddy. You know, like, but I really wound myself up about this. And so when people say to me, I don't like my voice, I'm like, it doesn't actually matter whether you like your voice or not. The fact is that people are listening to what you're saying rather than how you're saying it. They're going to be like, oh my God. Like, some people do love the fact that I can't say thesaurus or thesaurus or thesaurus. I don't know what it is. I don't know which one the right one is. Okay. I still don't. But they're not going to be like, oh God, I'm not going to give Maddy any money because she can't say thesaurus. You know, like, it's just not gonna, but like, that's kind of like the overthinking that we might get into, because someone once might have said that to us once upon a time. Like I said, I didn't have blue hair when I first started out. And when I started to kind of become more colourful on the outside, and people were like, it's like someone's like turned you inside out, Maddy, and just like, ta-da! And I was like, yes, it feels really vulnerable, actually. It feels like sandpaper being rubbed against my guts, you know, like it was really, really weird. So I do get it, I do. But I am very fortunate to have quite a lot of counselling along the way, had a lot of mental health support, and I continue to. I find that side of things extremely important. I was talking to someone the other day about how I've never been to the gym before in my life, but you might say I've been addicted to the mental health gym my whole life. You know, like it's just, that's how I choose to prioritize taking care of myself. So I do get it, but like you said, it is a muscle and you need to practice that muscle. What I was going to say was, when I did start doing Instagram stories, I decided to, because I'm 0 to 60 sometimes, I decided to do an Instagram takeover. Do you remember them? Do you remember how they were a big thing?
Yeah.
You would like I don't know what happened to them. Anyway, this was years ago, and I got in touch with an account in America who had 120,000 followers of female entrepreneurs, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to do it. So I did a day takeover on their stories. Do you know what happened? Absolutely zilch, nothing, nada whatsoever. Nothing happened. Didn't get a single inquiry. Got about 5 new followers. That was it. Like nothing. I couldn't believe how little happened from me giving SEO tips over on their Instagram stories. So it really was a valuable lesson in the fact that actually maybe that was my fear all along, that nothing would happen, as opposed to getting scrutinized. So I think that that was quite about, you know, whenever I sort of, I'm like, are you worried about being visible, or are you worried about being too visible? I think that, you know, in all the different ways, and then it's still not working out. So it's interesting to have that kind of thought process as well, and to really kind of map out almost in your mind what do you want to happen, what would you like to happen, and what are you worried that will happen, and how can you mitigate that, like quite logically, and then that will also help you kind of mitigate that risk that your emotional self is really going through.
Yeah, because it's probably more the fear of being ignored than being visible.
Yeah, we
No
talked about this before, didn't we? We're saying, are you genuinely afraid of being seen, or actually is the worst thing
A tumbleweed.
not being? Yeah, what is more frightening genuinely when it comes down to it? Is it actually that no one will respond and pay attention to you?
Yeah, and you can't quantify that, because not everybody does respond. People read it or see something and be like, oh, that's really cool. Yeah, you know, you think about it, or you don't immediately tell everybody everything you like about everything they've said. So it, until you see someone later on who's like, oh yeah, I saw that like last year, or the you know, the lady that messaged us about, you know, she's in Australia and she listened to one of our podcasts, and because we were talking about this, she did like an Instagram live, because she was like, well, I'm really scared about doing it, but I just did it anyway, because, you know, and it was like, oh my god, see, like,
yes,
you know, you don't know who it's reaching and how it's impacting them. So obviously it's a very human nature, isn't it, human emotion, to be scared of that, and nobody wants to be ignored and outside the tribe. But at the same time, like, we can't control, you know, what other people are thinking and know what they're thinking. So it's having a lot more impact than you even realize.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I often like to joke about lurkers and stalkers. Don't underestimate your lurkers and stalkers, because they're the ones who are going to open their wallets when you next launch something. Some of the people I'm just like, because like, so it's so funny with my course launches, they work so differently to my membership launches. So with my course launches, it's usually like quite a funnel. They come along, they do my free 3-day challenge, and then they're like much more likely to buy the course, or they've been messaging me for about a year since the last launch going, I didn't want to join this time, but they'll basically respond to every single story I do going, can't wait to join Bloggers Gold. Great, good. I'm launching in September. But then with the membership, who knows where they come from? They're lurkers. They're like, they might do my free thing. They most likely don't. And then they just come and join the membership anyway. And I find that so fascinating. So that's how I know that the visibility game works, because I am not doing a prescriptive thing. Like, I am trying different ways. I've got my email list. It's not massive considering how long I've been in business. But then again, that's the thing that I'm like, oh, I can't bother them too much, because, you know, I might lose even more. Like, it's so funny, the psychology of it all, right? But actually, sometimes people say to me, oh, I'm not going to start an email newsletter. I've only got 60 subscribers or something. And I'll always say this. So if you're listening to this, gang, I started with 12 subscribers on my list, and I always used to get sales from that list. Like, it was, whether it was one of them or someone they told about me, it worked really well. And then before I knew it, I had 100 subscribers, and before I knew it, I mean, now I've got around 2,000. So it's just like, it's just so interesting, isn't it? It's just like, again, I can't remember what the original point was, but like the point, like I honestly, I get so lost in it. So yeah, email marketing and Instagram posts, and sometimes I do Facebook ads, sometimes I don't. And sometimes people go to me, oh, you have to do Facebook ads to do course launches. Well, you could if you want to reach a certain number, but sometimes it doesn't always work anyway. Like, and I think there are just so many factors that we get lost in comparison. Oh yes, I remember what I was going to say. Back to the lurkers and stalkers. People literally don't even like your posts, but will tell you how much they enjoy your content. Like, it's so, and that really used to throw me off in the beginning. I was like, why can't you like all my posts if you like my content? I need to know, I need to have that personal validation, because otherwise what's the point in me showing up anyway? And actually that's not the point. The point is that they hopefully eventually buy something from them, but not always the case anyway. Not everyone who follows me is going to buy. And I think that's also quite a weird part of the visibility game as well. You're like, I'm showing up to a lot more people than are ever going to open their wallets for me, but that's part and parcel of it. If you walked into every shop on the high street and bought something from every shop that you passed every time you walk past that shop, it's not very sustainable, is it?
Definitely not. You'd soon have an empty wallet. Although
yes.
I feel like pubs might have a different I think then it might be acceptable.
So our audience are largely people like us, as in Sammy and I, in the sense of being kind of empaths, highly sensitive, generally quite introverted. How much do you resonate with these descriptors yourself? And what role do you think they've played in your own visibility journey, firstly?
Oh my goodness. Honestly, I have had quite a few conversations recently about my internet personality and my in-person, my real life personality. Because whilst they are very similar, don't get me wrong, I'm not putting all this act on or anything. Sammy can vouch for that, and so can Yuli. You both met me in real life. But I think that whilst I need a lot of recharging time, I really do. For all my online stuff that I do, for teaching, that requires a lot of energy to host online classes and calls and all this kind of thing. So I can definitely resonate with that. But I was doing a brand archetype exercise recently with a branding coach. And there was like, one of the personalities was jester, and I can't remember what the other ones, there was an explorer. Yeah. And it came out with like, I was a jester and this kind of thing in one aspect. And then another one, I was explorer, because I would want to go and like be with everyone and still be very relatable in a very intentional way, so that I'm like, I'm learning along with you lot. Like, I just know more about the specific techniques and tools available. And so when I'm thinking about, the people that you described, the descriptors that you just used, I very much feel like I resonate with that. It's just that I do it with a louder volume voice, and I do it with blue hair. And so I think that then people are like, oh no, you don't have a problem with confidence because of all these other descriptors that you also identify with. So I need a lot of recharging time. I need a lot of reflection time. I had my end of month reflection day yesterday. It was lovely. And I need a lot of kind of processing time. And I think that those aren't normally things that you would probably kind of look at me and go, oh, that's clearly what she's into. So that I think there's also a certain part of like, when you run your own business, you want to be on your own. That's why you're doing it. You don't want to be in this kind of big company of, big corporate entity or whatever it might be. And that also requires a certain sort of energy, I feel. A certain sort of willingness to touch into that vulnerability within yourself, to be that kind of person. Whether you've realized that at this moment or not, there's still that kind of, I want to be more soulful. I am a creative, not I want to be, I am a creative. I always used to say I'm not creative, and people were like, you what? Like it just wasn't something that I associated with myself. I was like, I work with creatives, but I wouldn't describe myself as creative. And then there's also the fact that I've had so many different chapters in my life, as have we all. And I've picked up something from each of those different chapters. And this is who I am right now. Yeah. I'm sure I will be someone else slightly different in a couple of years' time. But, you know, I hit 40 last year and I had this whole thing and I was just like, oh, you know, when I turned 30, I was like, I'm supposed to have done this and this and this. I was so hard on myself. I was so mean to myself. Then when I turned 40, I was like, I'm going to Mexico for a month. Bye. You know, like I was just like basically shut down the business for a month. It was amazing. I loved it. So I think that when it comes to how you describe yourself, the things that I've been sharing today, I think they can resonate with so many different types of people. And because I resonate with so many different types of people because of all these different chapters, I think that's the way I'm neatly going to praise what I've everything I've just said.
The funny thing is, I think when you're being visible intentionally in a way that feels good for you, people can perceive you as being really outgoing and extroverted and, you know, kind of this really out there person. So, you know, I've got bright red hair, and when I'm typing, when I'm behind a keyboard, I'm like, I'm in my element. So of course you know, people then meet me in person and go, oh wait, but you're shy. Yeah.
Yes.
But when you're showing up and being visible in a way that feels good to you and natural, you kind of give off this slightly different energy. So I know what you're saying when you're saying it's not an act. It's just when you are in your element, you're bringing a different vibe to it.
In your zone of genius, for sure. I
Okay.
think that something that's also I've realized with the pivot that I've been sharing about is that I've entered my sassy but soft era. So I've still got a lot to say, not going to stop saying it. I'm probably going to lean more into probably the more feminine and feminist aspects of visibility. But I'm also, with that comes that sense of vulnerability and probably needing more time to recharge in between.
I think that's such a good point, because when you're talking about visibility, it's all about the front end, but actually in order to do that side of it, you need the rest and the time and the processing, and I think that probably doesn't get spoken about enough in terms of the energy levels and maintaining that. And everyone's different, and some people get energy from things, some people it sucks energy from them, but learning where that works for you. And I think that's probably quite hard. Like I probably find that hard, definitely building that in as part of the business, as part of the work, is the rest and the processing time, and you know, so that you can then show up as, you know, in that zone of genius when you do.
Yeah, for sure. I think that when we are doing these things to be visible, I call it the vulnerability hangover. Mm-hmm. So after a podcast interview like this, for example, I'll go and sit, have some quiet time before I crack on with the next thing. I won't immediately go into the next thing. That's just not how my energy works, my ebb and flow. Because I've made so many mistakes. And I know it's a cliche, but I learn way more from my mistakes than I ever do from my successes, ever do. And I think that's a really important thing to learn about being visible as well. Yeah.
So it's probably just quite nice to wrap up then. It's a nice sort of point to end on. And obviously we always like to ask our guests the following question. What one thing do you want your listeners, well, our listeners, to take away from this episode? So if we started the phrase, "Dear Soulful Business Owner, I wish you knew this," how would you finish it off?
You know that a little bit of doom scrolling is inevitable, but it's not how you're going to find the answers.
It's a good one to end.
And that, and I think that's for any kind of app where you might be present.